Welcome to the Scent of Beauty. My name is Susan, and this video is titled Amendments. Do you recognize the initial proposal, part 2? In part 1, I talked about the psychodynamics as it pertained to relationships. And I needed a bicameral concept in order to gain an expensive picture of two branches with a governing system that they operate in with one authority. And Congress has been a tremendous help in formulating these videos. The House of Representatives and the senators. I needed to understand the psychology behind control, but not from a clinical standpoint, but more observational. And so I needed answers that would unfold, like what occurs with an initial bill. And again, that's why I said Congress was such a tremendous help, at least some of their duties, some of the duties. And I mentioned the sponsor presenting an initial bill and co-sponsoring. And it helped me to see that in relationship, it really is the proposal that is introduced in a relationship that gets the ball rolling. The person that is willing to be the backer, the one that is accepting the bill, accepting what the relationship is offering, at least in theory. And then the process, it gets activated, and the first step, it begins. I wanted to take a look at the psychodynamics of control. Psychodynamics is defined as the interrelational between the conscious and unconscious mental and emotional force that determines personality and motivation. Duality in one system. But I've learned sometimes in the control there is a ploy, there is a delay in the voting process to move a bill per se to the next level. What a senator or someone from the House of Representatives, what someone have the ability to do, and even the one that's proposing the bill, they have the right to make an amendment. Amendments. Non-germane amendments, which actually has nothing to do with the bill that was proposed. And in relationship, how control can happen so subtly that the proposal can suddenly change and subtly change without the co-sponsor realizing that they're combing through amendments. That's presented as a ploy to not move to another level. The co-sponsor at times don't get deterred by the sorting through the stockpile of assets and liability, attempting to discover image pieces of what was proposed in order to fix the proposal so it could be recognizable. And so it goes from partisan to bipartisan, having two systems operating when the amendments have made systematical changes. When the amendments have made minor changes with major consequences. However, the co-sponsor is so engulfed in rewriting, rewording, redrafting, and never leaving square one. When the next chapter is evasive, I call it the mirage to view the us that was proposed in the near future, what happens when that keeps moving to a location that is so far, far away. And I call it incognito, the unknown. And in relationship, we do that. We try to go through, sometimes, people attempt to go through others' character content or I would say to find personal significance. And that is the optimism through reasoning. Just having the feeling to continue the crusade when there are no logical experience to support the drive. And that's what I want to focus on in this video. Chasing the phantom, the nebulous image. I can feel it. Those are words that are used. I could feel it. What does that mean? The indeterminate, the not exactly sure, the uncertainty. Those years can be a state of being. When you weigh it, when practicality and effort is disproportionate, the absence of validity via experience. David Hume, right, was a Scottish philosopher, and in the 18th century, and he said something that helped me with, again, unfolding, expounding on this video. He says, reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passion and can never be pretend to any other office than to serve and obey them. He's saying that our feelings is actually overriding reason, an idea. So while it seems like the driving force is the idea itself, it really is what he calls the passion. He wrote, I think it's called Treatise of Human Nature, and it was written in 1739 to 1740, in that time frame. And he so eloquently wrote about impression of sensation and impression of reflection. I'm going to try to surmise it, what he wrote. It reminds me of the song, the head bone is connected to the neck bone, and it goes on and on. But he says that an impression first strikes our senses, and then we have we perceive either a pleasure. And then he said that the impression is copied to our minds, which remains after the impression ceases, right? So in other words, there's the proposal, and then there's so many amendments, so the proposal has ceased to exist. The initial proposal that was accepted has changed. But the idea, right, that idea, there was a copy already made within our minds, within the senses. So that's the impression of sensation. He said when the idea So when the idea when the idea returns upon our souls, then it produces the new impression of desire, which is called the impression of reflection, which derived from the impression of sensation. So it's almost like refeeling what was initially presented. So while the 18th century philosophers dealt with more our mental state, why do we do what we do, David Hume say it's the motivation that we need to take a look at, the passion, which we call today our emotions, our feelings, and our desires. The intentional, it's not the amendments to combing through the amendment. The intentional is really and truly the feeling that derives from what was initially offered. So in the psychology of control, what usually tends to happen is we try, a human being try to get themselves out of the loop by trying to think their way out of the situation. But from what David Hume states, we have to get more in touch with our feelings, the driving force, the passion, and take a look at that. I was introduced to the idea that I comes before the E, the intelligence before emotions, right? And so I was under the impression that if emotion was the numerator and the intellect the denominator, then I could calculate. Then the calculated whole would be problematic, right? So that's what I was under the impression. And so the advice would be, think about it. So mental reasoning was considered a sound recommendation. I've never personally heard feel about it. It doesn't even sound sensible. It sounds preposterous, actually. It kind of sounds comical, unthinkable, unreasonable. Feel about it. However, David Hume believed that the message in our passion is very vocal and very sensible. And you know what? I agree with him. Feelings and emotions are conditioned to be tapered around reason instead of being in concert with reason. And the idea to look out and to be on alert and be careful, and all these messages heads up over our feelings and emotion like they were pending danger lurking, and we need to have that guidance against our own feelings and emotions. And that's what David Hume wants and wrote about, for at least for us to examine and take a second look at it. For some of us, it's the first time we're even looking at the contribution of our emotions and feelings and not blaming them for plights. David Hume wants us to take, well, at least how my interpretation of his writing was, to take a look at the messengers within our feelings and emotion. And I also believe that he disagreed with the findings and believed that it's all about our mental capacity. And I believe that he also I believe that from his writings, that the less we learn about our feelings and emotion, that ignorance is the danger. So this is, I'm concluding part 2 right here. And the next video, part 3, is going to be amendments. What is indispensable? And that's going to be, again, part 3. Welcome to the Scent of Beauty.